Thank you all for joining us for the Overcoming Writer's Block and Perfectionist Tendencies workshop. Joining us today is Erin Zimmerman from the Writing Center, so I'm going to hand it over to her to get us started.
Thanks, Nemina. So thank you all for joining today. This is a topic that I think you all are all here because at some point in your lives you have felt this way. So hopefully my plan through this is to give you all some strategies for getting started, getting focused in moments where you know that you need to, but you're struggling to sort of make that happen. Oops, here. Sure, I can forward. There we go. So just sort of a quick overview of what we're going to do. We're going to discuss writer's block for a little bit, in particular, what causes writer's block. With that, sort of define imposter syndrome and how that can relate, as well as how perfectionism relates to writer's block. We'll talk about ways that you can make time to write, carve it out, make sure that you're staying focused through it. And we're going to in particular, look at some strategies that involve writing as a way to move through your writer's block. So I love this meme here because I think, like I said, all of us at some point have sort of felt this because writing is difficult. We often think of writing as sort of a quick, easy task, but especially when it comes to graduate level writing, to writing a thesis, to writing a dissertation, to writing something for publication, it's a very complex task. You're reflecting on lots of things that you've learned from potentially disparate areas. You're reading about multiple topics. You're creating questions that you want to find the answer to, thinking about how you can conduct research to then answer those questions. You're talking with other people to kind of work through your ideas. You've got ideas in your head, but then you've got to actually translate them into words that go on the page. You're thinking about who your audience is and how to communicate your ideas to them. And then of course you're taking breaks, you're taking notes and outlining, you're revising, you're proofreading. All of this is happening just by sitting down and writing. So it really is a lot more difficult often than we stop and give writing credit for. So it's not that surprising then that what we consider writer's block occurs occasionally for us. So these typically are negative feelings about writing. They may not exist all the time, right? You know, sometimes you feel them, sometimes you don't. They're fully situational, right? We're not necessarily born anxious writers, but because something is high stakes, because maybe it's something new to us, because we want it to be perfect, we start to feel these things, and that hinders our ability to move our work forward. So in particular, graduate students often feel what we call imposter syndrome, that you don't belong, right? That you don't really know what you're doing. You don't have the qualifications of your professors, but you're being asked to do work that's similar to the work that they do. So you feel sort of concerned about that, insecure about that. And that is something that is very prevalent in graduate school, and something that continues for those of you who go into academia as you start your work as a professor, as a teacher, as an administrator. Often those feelings sort of continue. But it's something for us to really be aware of and know that we can work through these and that we aren't in fact imposters. So perfectionism, as what was mentioned here before we started the presentation and in our chats, is a big piece of the way that we feel, of the blocks that we have, of the imposter syndrome often that we feel. And I like this quote by Anne Lamott that says, "Perfectionism will keep you cramped and insane your whole life, and it is the main obstacle between you and a shitty first draft." Right? And I like this because it reminds us that all we need to get started is a shitty first draft. We just have to have something on the page. We can't work with nothing. We have to have something. It doesn't have to be a good something, but it has to be something. So trying to push past that perfectionism to get something that maybe isn't great out there to start, to work with, to revise, to improve, that's really how we can manage writer's block and our anxieties about writing. And so perfectionism often manifests itself in different ways, sometimes different ways for different people, sometimes for us just in different contexts. So we might wait for a perfect time of day to write. We might wait for a perfect spot to write. We might wait until we feel a certain way to write. We might wait until we have just the right sources to begin to write. And again, probably a lot of you have had these moments, right? Some of you maybe even this summer have been like, oh, I could do this or that on my project, but let me wait until I get to boot camp, right? That's what that week's for, when you could have already started. So it's a way for us to procrastinate and something for us to really be aware that we're doing. And what we need to do is continue to find strategies to make sure that we're sort of bypassing these feelings of perfectionism. So other causes of writer's block, because I don't want everyone to think that it just has to do with perfectionism, is that we have our own internal critics, right? That we want something to meet a particular bar, even if it's not perfect, we want it to be good enough, right? And some of that can stem from past criticism that we've gotten about our writing. Maybe at some point we've been told our writing isn't good, or such and such isn't a strength of ours. And so that impacts us, impacts our psychology when we sit down to write. Excuse me. Other causes, feel of failure is a big one. Not that, you know, most of us are going to fail when we sit down to write, but especially for a high stakes assignment like a thesis or a dissertation, that's a real fear. Sometimes the opposite, the fear of success, is what kind of stymies us and gives us that writer's block. Sometimes it's about us holding high expectations for ourselves, but a lot of times it's that we perceive that somebody else has high expectations for us. So whether it's our major professor, whether it's a boss, you know, other people in our lives who have some sort of that we have a relationship to or have power over us in some way, even if they don't actually have those expectations, we might perceive them and hold ourselves to an unreasonable standard. Sometimes we're just burned out and we're distracted, right? And because of that, we can't sit down and do what we need to do. Sometimes we're not eating right, we're not sleeping right, and that impacts how we feel and whether we're motivated, whether our brains are ready to turn on and do work. Sometimes we're writing something new. Most of you probably haven't written a thesis before or a dissertation before or a scholarly journal article before, and that's intimidating. Sometimes the subject matter is difficult or maybe new to you, and so you're trying to do a lot more reading and you don't feel quite prepared to write yet. That can cause procrastination. Sometimes you feel like you have too much to say and you don't know where to start, or you don't have enough to say and you're not sure that what you have to say is important, so you kind of wait to get it down because it doesn't feel like it's good enough in that way. Or sometimes you have so much that you have to do or not enough that you have to do that, oh, okay, well, I can't get to it right now, I'll do it later. Or, well, I could do it now, but I don't need to yet, right? So those kinds of things cause procrastination. And then, of course, that anxiety of approaching deadlines can just cause us to shut down every once in a while. They're all legitimate reasons for us to feel anxiety, to get stressed out, to feel like we want to do anything else but this task that is in front of us that often is really big and feels really intimidating. So we shift and we head off somewhere else, and then we blame our lack of work on writer's block. So I want you to just take just a moment. I'm not going to ask you to write this down, although I'm going to ask you to write a few things in a minute. But I just sort of want you to think about your own writer's block, if you've had it at some point recently or just sort of generally in the past. Why was it that you felt like you got stuck? What were some of the feelings or the reactions that were sort of happening physically to you when you were feeling that writer's block? Um, at what point in your writing process, was it early in the brainstorming stage? Was it at the point where you need to just edit and proofread and you don't want to, you're sick of it? Where was it in that process that you were feeling stuck? Um, just take a minute to kind of think about that. You don't need to share it, but I just want you to reflect so that as we move forward, you can interact with some of the strategies that I give you a bit better because you know how you interact with writer's block. All right, so one thing that I think is really helpful, a book by Helen Sword that I'm going to give you the citation for in case you want to look at it a bit more. This book called Air and Light and Time and Space. And in it, she examines 1,323 academic staff, PhD students, and postdoc researchers across 15 countries to learn how they write. And what she found at the heart of it is this, that writing is neither a daily routine nor a rare occurrence. It's neither an immovable constant nor a random event. The secret to academic success lies in a complex cluster of attributes and attitudes that I call their writing base. And BASE stands for behavioral habits of discipline and persistence, artisanal habits of craftsmanship and pride, social habits of collegiality and collaboration, and emotional habits of positivity and resilience. And one of the things that I really like about this boot camp is that it really takes a lot of these base factors into account for you all. It's helping you really stop and think about each of these and how your habits in each of these ways impacts you and impacts your writing. So as I'm going through the strategies listed through these, I don't have them divided up specifically in these base categories, but I think you're going to see a lot of each of these occurring throughout. And I think keeping these categories, behavioral, artisanal, social, and emotional habits in your mind is again helpful just because if you can recognize, oh, the reason I'm blocked today is an emotional issue that I have, because something's going on in my life, that can help you more quickly figure out a strategy to deal with that, and then carve out time to write or get through other work that you need to in your day. So before we jump in, I want to take just one quick moment and have you all do a quick writing activity. And this is very much focused on, in particular, your behavioral habits. So what is it that you do when you write? So I would like you to write these down. You don't need to share them with anyone, but type them out at the computer you're at, on a piece of paper that you're at. But I want you to first think about how you start a writing assignment. So what is it that you do when you first get an assignment, maybe the whatever piece you're working on here in boot camp? How do you think through, okay, this is what I have to do, right? And kind of map it out. How do you break down your ideas and sort of just begin? Okay, so take just about 30 seconds to write down your thoughts on how you start a writing assignment. All right, so the next question is more about sort of space. Where do you go to write? Where is it that you write really well? And kind of with that, what do you need around you? You know, are you somebody that listens to music? Do you need quiet? Do you have particular lighting that's helpful? Do you need to have your cup of tea? What is it that's helpful for you when you sit down to start writing? So again, take 30 seconds to write those down. All right, so the next question is about the amount of time that you take. Are you somebody that likes to sit down and just write for 4 hours straight? Do you write in bursts, maybe 15 minutes and take breaks? Do you like to write a whole section, or do you jump maybe, you know, if you get stuck from one paragraph to another? Do you edit as you write, or do you wait until the end? Kind of what's your process in terms of managing your time and the work within that time? All right, so sort of related to that one, how do you revise and edit your writing? And how do you decide, okay, this is done, I'm finished, I'm ready to submit it? Right, the question that everybody loves, how do you procrastinate? What is it that you do when you're not writing and you prefer doing something else? And then what do you do to get yourself back into writing? So when you've been procrastinating, you don't want to write, but you force yourself to go do it. How does that happen? All right, so can sort of write your last word. But again, I think these can be really helpful. It's probably things that you know about yourself that you've written down, but maybe you haven't really consciously started to think about some of these things. And again, it's helpful to know these because in moments when you don't want to write, you might be able to think about, oh, this is a habit that I have that works for me. So maybe I can just take 10 minutes and go try this thing. Or this was a way I motivated myself to get back to writing yesterday. Let me see if it works today, right? And in your writing groups, I would encourage you to share some of these habits with others because one, you're going to find out that everybody has very different writing habits. And you might learn something helpful from one another by sharing, oh, this is what I do. Oh, you do that? That sounds cool. Let me try that. Okay. So basically what I'm going to do is give you a variety of strategies to help you start writing. So thinking about that procrastination, needing to get back into it, or maybe you went on vacation and now you're back to work and you just, oh, getting started is really hard, right? You've been away from it. So how can you start writing? And some of these are probably things that you already know to do, maybe you already do. And you know, some days they work, some days they don't work. So having a variety of strategies it can be really helpful for you. So the very first one is take notes. Okay, so you know, just sit down. Could even be a list. Here are the things that I know I still need to include in this paper, or oh, I just read this article. I want to incorporate it somehow. What were the main ideas, right? Sometimes it's just getting the pen to paper or fingers to the keyboards on something that's related, you know, even if it's not complete sentences, that can help you. Always think in terms of drafts. So again, going back to that perfectionism point, you know, have that shitty first draft, right? You can't revise something that doesn't exist, but you can revise something that's there and is bad, right? You can always improve that. So start with the draft. Always think about breaking larger tasks into smaller ones. You know, don't just say, oh, I'm going to sit down and write my literature review today, right? Like that in itself is daunting, even though that's only a small chunk of your full thesis or your full dissertation, right? So let's start with one text. Okay, here's a text that I know I want to include. What do I want to say about this, right? So anytime you can break tasks into smaller ones, that's going to help you. So make outlines, right? Again, okay, here's my literature review. What are the things that I know needs to go in the literature review, right? And just kind of jot those ideas down. And then you have a working plan, but you also have a place where, oh, okay, well, here's something I know I can write about. Let me start there. And that's the next one. Start where you have ideas. Don't feel like you have to start the very first word of the very first sentence of the very first paragraph of the very first section, right? Okay, oh, I just read this article. Yeah, it's not what I've been writing about in my literature review, but I know I could write about it right now. Let me start there, right? And then after I get that out, and then I've got a couple paragraphs written, great. I can go back, my juices are flowing in my brain, and now I can tackle the thing that I was getting stuck on yesterday because I've already started. So speed write. Speed writing is a technique that's really good if you're competitive, or if you have a really short amount of time. So, you know, if you've got 20 minutes between classes, right? You know, sit down, here's a question I need to answer, or this is what I've been working on. Set your timer for 15 minutes and just write as fast as you can, right? It's not going to be good, it's not going to be pretty, but it's there, right? So that then after class, when you have more time, you can come back to it. You've got something to work with, and it doesn't take you a whole lot of time to revise it and then keep going. Free writing or mind dumping. So with both of these, free writing is typically a bit more structured where you have a question or a topic that you're really focused on, and you're just going to write about that and just kind of almost stream of consciousness. You know, if your brain goes off over here, you're going to write about that until you can rein it back in and keep going. Mind dump is similar, but instead of sort of writing about anything, it's just everything that you've got in your brain, right? That all the to-do lists, everything like that, that you just want to get out, so that it's not cluttering up your brain anymore. That is a mind dump. Turn off your editing tools. So sometimes those little squiggly lines in Microsoft Word or Google Docs underneath the words, they distract us, right? We're writing and then, oh, this thing is underlined. There must be a grammatical problem. Let me go fix that. If that's something that distracts you, find out how to turn those off so that you don't see them. And then once you're ready to go back and edit, you can turn them back on. And then lastly, explain it to someone else. It's often easier for us to talk through our ideas with someone than to get them onto paper where we don't have a reader right there who can respond to us. So if you're just really feeling like, I don't know how to explain this, I don't know where I'm going, right? I mean, talk with one of your colleagues, with your major professor, with someone else on your committee. It can even be, you know, your daughter, your spouse, you know, just, okay, this is what I'm trying to say. Does this make sense to you, right? And if they say yes, great. If they say no, great, right? You know what you need to do, and you can kind of keep talking through it to really begin to then sit down and write something that makes more sense. All right, so I want us to do a quick practice from these strategies for getting your writing started. So I want you to think about what you've been working on today or in the last couple of days. So what is the current task, or what is the next thing that you're planning to do, okay? And so what I want you to do through this, I think I'm only going to give you 2 minutes just because we only have an hour, and I have other practices that I want you to do from our strategies. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes. And I want you to, what you do is write as much as you can and try not to stop. And I'm going to give you some prompts so you're not just writing about nothing. And I want you to just go where your brain takes you. So write as fast as you can. Don't worry about writing incomplete sentences. Don't worry about your grammar. Don't edit anything. Just get everything out of your brain onto the paper or onto the screen as fast as you can. Okay? So, oops, sorry, the slide got a little confused. So I want you to either pick the current or the next task on your list and write just everything you know about that topic. So that can be sources, can be things that you still need to find, what else you might need to do alongside this particular task. Or if that doesn't feel comfortable to you, write about what your next step is. So what are you prepared for? What do you still need to do before you can get started? Can you break it down into smaller tasks? You know, how really can you plan for it? Okay. So again, 2 minutes, as fast as you can, no editing. Don't worry about complete sentences. Just write. You got 15 seconds left, so write fast. All right, so write your last word. And if you'd like in the chat to just sort of share your experience, that would be fantastic. But hopefully, what has happened is maybe you feel energized. Maybe you were starting to feel sleepy after lunch, and now you're like, oh, I think I could do something, right? Maybe you know where to start, or you know what the next thing is that you are gonna do, and how you're gonna do it. You maybe have something written that now you can work with, so you can cut it, paste it, revise it. Or maybe you feel a little bit more confident, that maybe you know a little bit more than you thought that you did. Okay, I like this, like ripping off a band-aid, right? Didn't want to work on it, and now you're just like, do it, right? Yes, not editing is hard. Absolutely. It's really hard. Um, and and in the moment, right? Like the strategies that I'm giving you are just that, right? I want you to adapt them to what works for you. So there are going to be times where you're like, Erin, I gotta go edit, right? Go edit it. That's what's going to work for you in that moment. But there are going to be other times where, okay, let me just stop and get this out, right? Because that's what's going to be better for you. Okay, yeah, you didn't realize how much you go back and edit. That's helpful to know, right? You can kind of pay attention to it. And more words came out than you expected. That's fantastic. So many errors. Don't worry about the errors, man. We'll deal with those, right? Now you have something written, you can work on the errors later. So the next set of strategies that I want to talk through are about actually carving time out for you to write, because sometimes this is difficult. And I know that a lot of what boot camp is about is about dealing with these. So these may be sort of repeated from other workshops, but I want to make sure that I reiterate them here. So the first one is track your time. So just like in that moment where it's like, oh my gosh, I have more errors than I thought, or oh my gosh, I spend more time editing than I realized. Tracking your time can be really helpful because you maybe don't recognize exactly how long certain things take you to do. So the more that you pay attention to it, and kind of step away from these being sort of tacit actions that we do, but really kind of make them conscious, it's going to help in the long run get a sense of, oh, okay, I now have an hour before the next thing that I have to do. What can I get done realistically in that hour? Okay. Identifying productive times of day. There's a lot of research that argues that we need to write every single day. And there's a lot of research that contradicts that. I'm somebody that I'm not good at writing every day. It never really worked for me. But if I could track my time and if I could identify when I'm most productive, then on the days that I can carve out time that I do need to write or want to write, I know, okay, this is the time of day that works best for me. And of course, it doesn't always work out, right? That's when you have available. But excuse me, the times, the days that you do have that time available, know it, right? And then you're more likely to sit down and work in those moments. Carving out time. This is one of the most difficult things to do because everything else in our life feels like it takes priority. Our classes, our work, our lives, our families, just eating and going to the toilet sometimes, right? It feels a lot more important than sitting down and writing. But we really have to dedicate time to that. So whatever you can do, telling your family from this time to this time is writing time, do not disturb me. Telling your colleagues that, putting it in your calendar, whatever the case may be. However, use your writing groups. This is the time that we're all going to sit down and write. However it works for you, but carving out that time and making sure that writing or something related to your writing, right? I consider reading your sources part of writing time because it's helping you to write your thesis, to write your dissertation. But carve that time out and don't let things get in the way. So chunk your writing, right? So we talked about having tasks broken down into smaller pieces. Same thing here, right? Write in smaller bits, focus on an individual question, an individual topic, an individual result. Leave the transitions until later, the polishing until later. That can help you just sort of focus, okay, if I can just write up this one result in the next hour, right? That feels a lot more manageable than I got to write my results section today. Okay. Set regular goals. So again, if you're somebody that's kind of competitive, can you reach 5,000 words, in the next 3 hours? Things like that. So anything that works for you. It can be time, it can be words, number of pages. Again, however it works for you, but setting goals sometimes can be super helpful. Reward yourself, right? Think about those things that cause you to procrastinate or that you go do instead of procrastinating, right? Use those as rewards. Okay, if I write, another page today, or if I write for another 30 minutes, then I'm going to let myself go do those things, right? Go eat that ice cream cone, go smoke that cigarette, go watch that TV show, whatever it is that fulfills you, that makes you happy, right? So keep that in mind. Find ways to reward yourself. Oh my goodness, my ands and ors are just so messed up in this presentation. I apologize. All right, so I want us to practice again. So thinking about carving out time. And again, you've maybe done this maybe for this week here in boot camp. So if that's the case, maybe think about further out, maybe next week or the rest of the month. But so look back to your goals list and see if you can break down any of those tasks into smaller ones. And then really set, okay, here are the goals that I can accomplish by whatever date makes sense for you in terms of the goals that you already have set up. Or look at your calendar, right? For next week, for next month. When are the times that you can carve out to write? When are your put your classes in there, put your work schedule in there. Where can you fit 30 minutes here, an hour there, 6 hours there, right? When can you actually carve those out? So just again, take about 2 minutes and see if you can make any progress with either of those to make time for your writing. right, take just a few more seconds to wrap up. So another thing too that I'll mention here, just in terms of thinking about goals, carving out time, is that there might be ways for you to integrate technology to help you sort of manage your time. So maybe you're going to like start setting timers on your phones to help you track yourself. Maybe you're going to use Google Calendar to alert you to the times when, oh, okay, I said I was going to carve out writing time. Now I need to do it. So those kinds of things, just keep in mind that technology can be helpful for you. And what I've done is I've included a handout that's on the Web Campus page for you all that lists a variety of technical platforms, apps, things like that, that could be helpful for you. I tried to pick ones that were free or less than $5, but there are many, many, many more out there. So kind of see what's there, see if they're helpful for you, but know that there's a lot more that can help you with starting writing, with carving out time, and with focusing your writing, which is the next piece that I want us to cover here in terms of the strategies. So thinking about how to maintain focus, I asked you this earlier with your habits, what is the space that is conducive for you to work? So really find those productive locations. Again, you're probably not always going to be able to be there in the moments when you're writing or when you have time to write, but if you can have a handful of places that you know to go to, okay, it can be the library, maybe the back seat of your car, you've got a great desk in your house, maybe it's the kitchen table and you don't want to work at your desk, right? But figure out where those places are and what it is that you need around you, right? If you don't like noise, don't go to the student union and sit in the cafeteria area, right? That's not going to be conducive for you. Make sure that you're eating and drinking. So at the graduate level, I'm hoping that you all know to do this, but we get stressed out. We get anxious about all the things that we have to do. And these necessary acts during the day are the things that often we push aside and postpone. So make sure you're staying hydrated. Make sure that that you're eating well, right? You need those in order to keep your brain and your body going. So really figure out what habits work best for you. So again, I had you kind of reflect on those for a bit, but if you work better in short bursts, then that's great. So then, what time limit is it that's kind of the longest that you want to sit and write? That's how you want to carve out your time. Don't carve out 6 hours, right? Carve out 20 minutes here or there, or know how you're going to take breaks if you do have to carve out 6 hours. Um, think about all those sorts of things, have that bag of potato chips or whatever it is ready to go in the time that you've carved out because you know you need that to be productive. So switch it up. So when you get stuck, um, uh, think about ways that you can sort of jumpstart your brain or your body into doing something different. So this could be in relation to tasks. So maybe you have a chapter or a section that you've already written, but you still need to edit it, and you're kind of getting stuck on what you're working on now. Take a break from that and go back to that other section and work on editing, right? Then that way you're still being productive. You're still doing things that you need to do. You're just stopping from the thing that, you felt stuck on. One thing that's helpful about doing that is anytime you're taking breaks, your brain is still working. It's not like it just shuts off and you're not thinking about what you're writing about because you're now doing something different. So going and doing a different task that's still helping you move your writing project forward, it just gives you that space away from it. And sometimes when you come back, even if it's only been 10 minutes, you can kind of jump back in and, oh, this is maybe a better way to go with it, right? In terms of switching it up, it may even be that you need to switch it up more physically, right? So maybe you need to switch up the time of day that you're writing. It maybe you do need to just pick up and move to a different location. Or maybe it's technology. Maybe you've been sitting at the computer and writing for a while. Maybe sit down, shut your laptop off and sit down and handwrite for 10 minutes. Sometimes just doing something as simple as that can kind of change things up enough that your brain restarts and you can keep going again. So take breaks. Try and stretch, go for a walk if you can. Just give your thinking mind a break, right? Whether you meditate, whether you do yoga, whether you take a nap, whether you just go eat a meal, but make sure that you are taking breaks. Again, sort of like with the eating and drinking, breaks are the things that once we're busy, once we're stressed out, we stop doing them. And they're really necessary because, again, our brains don't just stop thinking about and working on the problems in our writing. We're still sort of simmering on them, thinking about them. And 30 minutes later, we might have a better idea about how to move forward if we've gone and sort of done something else for a little bit of time. And then the last thing is release frustration. We often get tense, we often get stressed, and then we hold on to that. And that's not something that is helpful for us when we're trying to focus, because then all we can do is think about the fact that we're frustrated and we're stressed out. So go do whatever it is you've been putting off, right? Whether it's laundry, whether it's cooking dinner, right? Go do that. Once it's done, you're going to stop thinking about it and you can get back to writing. It could also be something physical that you need to do. Maybe you just need to go shut the door in the closet and scream for a couple of minutes. Maybe you need to go for a run. Maybe you need to just sit and meditate. Whatever it is that helps you release frustration, go and find ways to do that safely as much as possible. Um, so just one last sort of quick practice activity, and this one again is a bit more reflective. So since you're here in boot camp, I want to know what habits, locations, break activities are working well for you. I know it's only Tuesday, but what seems like, okay, I tried that out and it's been good. So take a minute and just kind of jot those down, list those out. Right, and then just sort of along those same lines, but the complete opposite, what of those things haven't been working well for you? What is it that you have done so far this week that's just like, oh, that did not help me at all? Oops, sorry about that. And then the last one, so thinking back to your writing habits that you listed out earlier, as well as some of these strategies. If there are things that aren't working well, can you make any adjustments? Can you plan to try something different later this week or later today? Or if something was working well, but you think you could improve it a little bit, how might you adjust it to make sure, like, oh, let's try this out and maybe it'll help me with my focus. So it's possible, because we're only on Tuesday, that you don't really have a whole lot yet, but I would recommend that you kind of keep this in the back of your mind, especially this week, but other times that you've got a lot of time carved out in the week, or over, several weeks, to really get a sense of, okay, what strategies are working right now and what are not. Because again, these things change depending on how we feel that day, but depending on what it is that we have to do, depending on how much we have to do. The strategies sometimes are going to work and sometimes they're not going to work. So that's why I think having a wide variety can be really helpful for you, because it does allow you to switch them up. Um, so just a few sort of general tips that I want to end with. First is get support from other people. So hopefully a lot of you have found writing groups if you feel like that's going to be conducive for you. Um, but just find someone else, whether it's your major professor, whether it's a colleague in your program who's also writing their thesis or dissertation or project. Somebody that you can vent to, somebody that can hold you accountable and help you set deadlines and hold yourself to them. Those kinds of things can be really useful for you. Also, give yourself credit, right? You have all now written something, right? I forced you to write something. It may not be something good, right? But you've written something, and that's the first step, is just getting started. And often that's the hardest part. When you step away from it and come back to it, getting started again is often really hard. So give yourself credit for the work that you've done and the work that you're doing. Keep in mind that nobody, I don't use absolutes very often, but this is one place that I feel pretty confident in the years that I have been teaching writing and working with writers, that no one has a good first draft. They're all shitty, and writing really is a skill, and it's something that you have to practice. Everybody has to practice. Some people find bits and pieces of it easier than others, but there are moments where it's difficult for everybody. So just remind yourself that you're not alone in that. And similarly, you are not your writing. So separate yourself from that, because your writing is going to be critiqued. But those critiques are not about you. Those critiques are about your writing. So really, as much as you can, separate those, because sometimes when you internalize that criticism, and take it personally, that's harmful for you, and that can impact your stress levels, impact your writer's block, and impact your ability to move forward. And then finally, listen and revise. So give feedback from people who you trust. Try to learn from that, and apply it as much as you can, and revise as soon as possible. Okay. Um, so just three texts that I think can be super helpful. The first two really about just how to carve out time to write, how to get a lot of writing done. And then the last one is the Air and Light and Time and Space text that I mentioned earlier. And I also have all of these listed on the handout that is on Web Campus, and this presentation is on Web Campus as well. Um, I also have a variety of UNLV resources, which I think probably you are all aware of already, but I just wanted to post them here just in case you were not. And we've got 3 minutes, so I'm happy to take questions, but I would also love for all of you here in the chat to share some of the strategies that have worked for you, especially if I have not covered something, right? So what is it that you all do that you would like to just share with the others in terms of strategies for moving your writing forward that you think could be helpful? And definitely, if you have questions, I'm happy to take those too. Oh, interesting. Writing on your cell phone. That would drive me crazy. So I love that you mentioned that. That's such a cool one. All coming in at once. I'm gonna scroll up. Okay, yeah. So having somebody else that is helping hold you accountable, I have found that to be really helpful too. Yeah. Switch it up. Writing about how much you're frustrated. Definitely. Yeah. Just getting out that sort of mind dump, right? Like even if it's not necessarily related to your writing project, writing about like why you're annoyed today or what you have to do today can be really cathartic and can help you just then get started. Yes, the Pomodoro method. So the Pomodoro method I've included on that handout. I know a lot of people who that really works well for, where you have a timer, you work, focus on one task for a certain amount of time, take breaks. Yeah. Using a dictate tool. Yeah, definitely. A lot of times here in the writing center, we recommend that to writers to have to either record their ideas as they're talking, or to have technology sort of read your paper back to you so that you hear it. And a lot of times that can be super helpful. Creative breaks, yes, excellent. Yes, writing about the prompt, that can be super helpful, especially if it's something for a class where you have a very clear assignment prompt. Just kind of taking notes on that can be super helpful. Um, Walking around, absolutely, absolutely. Uh, do a handstand on the wall. I love it. Um, yeah, dictate apps. That's a good question. I'm okay. So Cecilia says word dictate. I'm not sure if that's the name of it. Yeah, do not disturbs. Hopefully that'll work. Okay, dragon dictation, office word. Google Docs, you can speak into and it will type. Um, uh, for me, being from the South, my accent throws it off a little bit. But I have done that at times. But I'm sure there are better ones. All right, so it's just after 2, so let me turn it back over to Nevina.
Thank you so much for sharing your time with us today, Erin. This is so helpful.